Hello friends, today we are going to be studying about John Stuart Mill's ideas on liberty. We'll start with who Mill was and what ideas he propagated. So, Mill was the greatest champion of liberty, the greatest champion of democracy, but not for colonies and barbarians, and hence also called reluctant democrat. He was a utilitarian. He tried to modify it but ended it in the attempt. He was an economist. There is inconsistency in his thoughts because of his times. Like Machiavelli, he is also a transitional thinker. If Machiavelli is standing on crossroads of medieval and modern, Mill is standing on the crossroads of classical and modern liberalism. His prominent works include On Liberty 1859, On Representative Government 1861, On Utilitarianism 1863, On Subjection of Women 1869. So, the sources of influence on John Stuart Mill include Jeremy Bentham and Greek thinkers like Socrates and Plato. Mill's views on liberty are to be found in his classic work On Liberty, 1859. Mill's work on liberty is regarded as one of the founding texts of liberalism and one of the most prominent treatises ever written on the concept of liberty. And this book explores the nature and limits of the power that can be legitimately exercised by society over the individual. Now finally, what are Mill's ideas on liberty? It is said that if anyone is liberal, it is Mill. It is said so because it was Mill who for the first time gave elaborate and systematic view of liberty in his book On Liberty. Though John Locke talks about natural rights of life, liberty and property, he hasn't given a detailed view on the liberal concept of liberty. He has given a detailed view of a right to property and came to be known as scholar of possessive individualism. Bentham sidelined liberty and brought utility as the core concept of liberty. So it was only Mill who gave an elaborate and systematic view of liberty. According to Mill, liberty is a condition for human happiness. It's both an individual good as well as a social good. It's an individual good because without it we can't develop our personality. It's also a public or social good because it is good for a state or society to give liberty to its people. In the words of J.S. Mill, no state becomes great by dwarfing its own people. With small men, no great things can really be achieved. And the only basis for state intervention in the liberty of man is when his actions harm the others. So Mill divides human actions into two types: self-regarding action and other-regarding actions. State can interfere in the liberty of man only when it harms the liberty of others, that is, other-regarding actions. So there are certain characteristics of Mill's ideas on liberty. Number one, Mill associates the concept of liberty with the liberty of the individual's freedom to exercise his sovereign will over his mind and body in pursuit of his self-development is supreme. Mill divides the activities of an individual into two types, as already said: self-regarding, which affects the person himself, and other-regarding, which concerns others also. Number second, Mill argued the individual's freedom of liberty needs protection from the state because it's necessary for the individual to develop. So he thus argues the forms of government are to be evaluated in terms of their capacity to enable each person to exercise and develop in his or her own way their capacities for higher forms of human happiness. Such development will be an end for each individual, but also a means for society as a whole to develop and to make life better for all. In this context, he comments, a state which dwarfs its men in order that they may be more docile instruments in its hands, even for beneficial purposes, will find that with small men no great things can really be accomplished, and that the perfection of machinery to which it has sacrificed everything will in the end avail nothing for want of the vital power which, in order that the machine might work smoothly, it has preferred to banish. Number third, Mill was also concerned with protecting individual liberty from social tyranny, which he felt may be more formidable than political oppression because it's more encompassing of the details of human life and leaves little or no room for escape. The society can provide greater restrictions on an individual from expressing his feelings and opinions. He argued whenever an individual tries to live his life in an unconventional manner, social forces stop him from doing so. So the political system in his view may be less wholly relevant when society itself is so meddling. Number fourth, Mill was the greatest champion of freedom of thought and expression. According to Mill, most important right is freedom of thought and expression, which must include freedom of action according to thoughts and freedom of association with like-minded people for the better articulation of one's views. Number fifth, finally, it's important to remember Mill's concept of liberty is basically a negative concept of freedom because he makes the case against any controls on liberty. His view is based on the belief that society is a collection of self-seeking individuals and public good is maximization of the satisfaction or utility of each of these individuals separately. And the best way of maximizing individual satisfaction in his scheme of things was by allowing the maximum freedom to each individual. So Mill basically clarified and detailed his position on liberty by defending three specific liberties, which are liberty of thought and expression, including the liberty of speaking and publishing, liberty of action, and liberty of association. We'll be talking about liberty of thought and expression first. Mill was the greatest champion of freedom of speech and expression. According to him, most important right is freedom of speech and expression, which must include the freedom of action according to thoughts and freedom of association with like-minded people for the better articulation of one's views. Now, why is it most important according to Mill? It is the most precious gift of God to man, according to Mill. Out of all species created by God, only human beings have the capacity to think, to speak, and to resolve their problems by dialogue. Hence, freedom of speech and expression is the most sacred right. On Mill, we can also see the influence of Greek thinkers like Socrates, who emphasized on dialectics or elenchus to understand the truth, since the objective of life is to understand the truth. His theory of liberty is closely linked to his theory of democracy also. Democracy has to be deliberated, and for that freedom of speech and expression is very important. Democracy shouldn't be understood as tyranny of majority. According to him, majority must listen to minority. Just like tyranny of one over all can't be tolerated and accepted, in the same way, tyranny of all over one can't be accepted. Mill was particularly concerned that just because the majority keeps an opinion that is different from what an individual believes in could lead to him being suppressed, the tyranny of the majority in other words. He seems to be saying, if all mankind minds one were of one opinion and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. He gave three reasons and grounds for maintaining freedom of opinion and expression. A. Any opinion we silence may be true, and in silencing it, we assume our own infallibility. Any opinion that is rejected or suppressed may be partly true, and because the prevailing opinion is never the full truth, suppression will deprive the process of evolving the final truth. And C. Even if the prevailing accepted version of the truth is the whole truth, without opinions emerging that challenge it, it will only become like a dogma and lead to prejudice. Is the liberty of action. When it comes to the liberty of action, Mill asserted a very simple principle, harm principle, which says the sole end for which mankind are warranted individually or collectively in interfering with the liberty of action of any of their members is self-protection. The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. His own good, either physical or moral, is not a sufficient warrant. Thus, Mill divides human actions into two types, self-regarding and other-regarding actions. State can't interfere in self-regarding actions. State has to leave the individual free there. However, state can interfere in the liberty of man only when it harms the liberty of others, that is, other-regarding actions. Now, Mill actually acknowledged that it was difficult to draw a line between self-regarding and other-regarding actions, and he provided some hypothetical examples as proof of this difficulty. For instance, if a man destroys his own property, this is a case of other-regarding action because others dependent on that man will be affected as well. Even if this person has no dependents, his action can be said to affect others who, influenced by his example, might behave in a similar manner. Now, against this, Mill said that only when one has specific obligations to another person can one be said to affect his or her interests. Therefore, the case of an individual affecting others by his example will not stand. On this ground, Mill cited that all kinds of restrictions on not eating pork or beef or priestess being required not to marry as examples of unnecessary restrictions on self-regarding actions. Mill wrote that sometimes, even in the case of other regarding actions, no restrictions can be placed on one. For instance, if one wins a job through competition, this action can be said to affect others' interests by ensuring that they do not get the job, but no restrictions are applicable here. Similarly, trade has social consequences, but believing in the principle of free trade, Mill argued that lack of restrictions on trade actually leads to better pricing and better quality of products. Mill is also inconsistent in his view with respect to state's intervention in self-regarding actions. He believes that state can interfere in the self-regarding actions if the person is not aware of consequences. He gives the example of a man crossing a bridge which is about to fall. It is the duty of the state to make the person aware that she may lose his or her life. Mill claims that in order to interfere with the liberties of an individual, their conduct must be judged to produce evil to others. As to what the boundaries of evil are and who is qualified to assess this evil and what biases do they carry, Mill makes no clear distinction. For instance, if a low-income father spends all of his family's money on gambling, liquor, or prostitution and in turn deprives his wife and children of food and shelter, then he should certainly be punished. But if this father happens to be wealthy and can still afford to provide for his family in addition to paying for his vices, should he be punished as well? Here it's not so much the activities themselves but how they affect the responsibilities of the individual. In situations like these, should gambling, drinking and prostitution be outlawed simply because some people can't handle the remainder of their responsibilities? For instance, smoking may be a repulsive habit to many, but should an individual's freedom to smoke be called into question? While second-hand smoke does affect others, this is not a direct threat to survival the way that a drunk driver is. The point is that there is certainly a difference in the degrees of harm or the inconvenience that can potentially affect others by an individual's behavior. In addition, as the previous example points out, the same freedom affects different individuals in different ways. association. Mill defended freedom of association on three grounds. First, when the thing to be done is likely to be done better by individuals than by government, speaking generally, there is no one fit to conduct any business or to determine how or by whom it shall be conducted as those who are personally interested in it. Second, allowing individuals to get together to do something, even if they do not do it as well as the government might have done it. It is better for the mental education of these individuals. The right of association becomes, for Mill, a practical part of the political education of free people, taking them out of the narrow circle of personal and family selfishness and accustoming them to the comprehension of joint concern, that is, habituating them to act from semi-public or public motives, and guide their conduct by aims which unite instead of isolating them from one another. Further, government operations tend to be everywhere alike. With individuals and voluntary associations, on the contrary, there are varied experiments and endless diversity of experience. Number third, if we let the government do everything, there is the evil of adding unnecessarily to its power. Barker calls Mill as the prophet of anti-liberty. Barker is a positive liberal. He doesn't support the idea of negative liberty. The understanding of liberty as non-interference by state is a hollow idea of liberty according to Barker. Barker believes that Mill is unable to defend his idea also. Mill goes for non-scientific classification of human actions. Actually, there are very few actions which can be considered as purely self-regarding. Most of the actions can be interpreted as other-regarding actions according to Barker. In reality, there is no real scope for man to enjoy liberty. Barker also calls Mill as a scholar of abstract individualism. It means that the man which Mill talks about is abstract rather than real. The real man living in society has hardly any scope of liberty in the way Mill thinks about it. Mill is also inconsistent in his view with respect to state's intervention in self-regarding actions. He believes that state can interfere in the self-regarding actions if the person is not aware of consequences. He gives the example of a man crossing a bridge which is about to fall. It's the duty of the state here to make the person aware that he may lose her or his life. Despite all this, we can't overlook Mill's contributions towards the concept of liberty, and it's rightly said that if anyone is liberal, it is Mill.